Welcome to the Keto Geek Podcast. Let's do this.
Health, nutrition, fitness, low-carb lifestyle.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Keto Geek Podcast. This is your host, Fahad, again. I hope you guys are doing great. We are swarmed over here, and you guys love our stuff way too much. We are working crazy long hours, fulfilling orders and doing shipments. And if you get an email at about 2 o'clock in the morning saying your order has been shipped, then realize that we are actually up at 2 o'clock in the morning doing exactly that. So we really thank everybody who's been patient with us and ordered our products. It means a lot. And so, thank you so much. Anyway, a couple of people have pointed out to me that you guys plug your product as at the start of the podcast. And the reality is, guys and gals, that Keto Geek is technically a food business. If it weren't for these products, there would be no Keto Geek podcast. Just like writers sell books, bloggers sell clicks, and trainers sell meal plans or training plans, Keto Geek sells products. So it's part of our infrastructure. It also helps us stay really unbiased and choose whatever direction we want to go towards, because Keto Geek is the podcast is self-sustaining, meaning that we don't require external sponsors or any sort of influences to affect us. So this allows us to bring some interesting guests to our podcast without having any sort of limitations or being totally a market or sales-oriented podcast. So that's been our narrative. And in fact, we actually learn a lot and apply it right away to our products. An example would be that when we had Dr. Sean Baker and Dr. Peter Ballerstedt on our podcast, we realized that a lot of our women in our country are not getting enough protein, or there seems to be a protein deficiency here. We created the Coffee Protein Energy Pod, which was geared to be high in protein and relatively high in fat as well at the same time. So, and combined with coffee, now we created this unique product that is aimed to provide protein to a lot of people in our country. So we try to turn everything what we learn into something more practical. That's our goal with Keto Geek, distilling science from something complicated into something simple. All right, so let's get back to the show. In this episode, we had Zsofia Clemens show up to the podcast, and we had a wonderful conversation about the potential of a carnivorous diet when it comes to combating chronic conditions, and it was a very eye-opening experience for me. So who exactly is she? She is a biologist and clinical researcher specialized in nutrition, nutritional therapy, and brain research. She has been affiliated with the National Institute of Clinical Neuroscience in Budapest and the Neurological Department at University of Pécs, Hungary. I hope I pronounced that right. Currently, she is also the leader of Paleo Medicina in Hungary. In academic journals, she has published 40 research articles with more than 1,100 citations. So in other words, she's pretty kick-ass. And ladies and gentlemen, let me bring to you this wonderful interview I had with Zsofia Clemens. Hello everyone, welcome back to Keto Geek Podcast. Today we've crossed the Atlantic and reached out to this wonderful group called Paleo Medicina, and we're going to have some interesting questions for them. And we have Zsofia Clemens from Paleo Medicina here on board with us. Zsofia, how are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I am doing great. We're all the way here in California. It's really sunny and nice over here, and we're enjoying the weather. Are you guys freezing over there?
Yes, quite a lot. It is already winter.
All right. So anyway, what what's really fascinating is you guys have practically taken the food pyramid and flipped it upside down, and just it just throws everything out of proportion as far as food, nutrition, diet, healthcare, fitness. Everything just goes out of the water from what you guys are doing. So I'm just curious right away, how did this whole journey begin for you? What's your backstory?
So I'm a biologist, and my original background is epilepsy. I have been involved in brain research, but I've always been dealing with patients, with epilepsy patients. And as you may know, epilepsy is the only disorder where the ketogenic diet is also accepted by the mainstream. It is not very frequently used, but it is accepted. It is not being regarded as a fad diet. It is accepted as effective and science-based. So I know actually much about the ketogenic diet from the very beginning. And in 2010, I came across the paleo concept. Actually, it was a heuristic feeling, an aha feeling. I always had an evolutionary way of thinking, and this concept just fitted into what I already had in my mind. So it changed the way I was thinking. And in 2012, I met Dr. Csaba, who is currently my colleague. And that time he already been using paleo diet in the treatment of patients, and actually it was a carnivorous diet, animal meat fat-based diet. So we started to work together.
All right. So you guys started Paleo Medicina right afterwards, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So what happened? Why did you guys choose to go this way? As in, everybody in the world says meat causes cancer, meat causes this and that. And you guys just went to the whole side of the spectrum. What was it that caused you guys to do this?
Because the science behind the paleo concept and the evolutionary medicine was quite convincing. And my colleague Csaba had Crohn's disease, in addition to type 2 diabetes and many other conditions. And he just started using the diet, and he recovered. And it turned out very early that it is the meat-fat-based diet itself which is useful in the treatment of Crohn's symptoms. And later on, he started to use the diet in close friends or family members. And it turned out that it is working in many conditions. So he gained experience quite quickly.
Okay. So I'm curious about how the healthcare system in Hungary works, or if you have any idea of how it works in Europe as well. Like, how is it different? Is there anything unique about it that you think?
No, actually, the structure of the healthcare system is the same throughout the world, at least the westernized part of the world. And the medicine is itself is based on drug treatment, and the same drugs are being used in the whole world, maybe under the other brand name, but actually the active substance is the same. And the protocols are also the same. So the protocol for using cancer, or for treating cancer or cardiovascular disease or diabetes is actually the same everywhere in the world, in Europe and in the US. And the third thing is prevention. The same principles are used in the prevention of chronic diseases, and it is nowhere to work.
Okay. So over here, a lot of the people that I've interviewed, they go on to places like Sci-Hub, they'll go to ResearchGate. That's where they go for keeping themselves chiseled as far as knowledge is concerned. What about yourself? Where do you go if you were to do some research or figure out some concepts? What kind of resources do you use?
So the first thing that there are many questions where I cannot find any answer in the current literature, and that's a main thing, because what we are doing is at the forefront of something new. And there are no data regarding what we are doing. So you can find much, or not much, but some data on disease and nutrition, but actually how to deal with a type 1 diabetes child using an animal meat fat-based diet. So this is something you cannot find anywhere in the literature. So we are driven by our own experience and observations. So this is a knowledge by observation.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, what kind of literature I used to read, I really like the classical physiologists, for example, because their knowledge is quite big. And, everybody is obsessed with reading the latest research that came out last month, last year, and so on. But sometimes it is more useful to go back to the classical scientists and who are quite great minds. I have to mention Walter Voetlin, for example, who is not just a theoretician but a practitioner as well, and he didn't write many articles. He just published a single book which is entitled The Stone Age Diet, but it is a masterpiece. So it should be read by everyone in the carnivorous society and beyond. And I also like to read the books of the travelers and anthropologists who went to the Arctic people and studied the Inuit people, for example, Nansen or Stefansson, and so what you can read in these books is nowhere else to find, and there is no more possibility to study these cultures, because they are so these people are, and the culture is already gone.
Yeah. And right now in our Western world, or around the world in general, you notice how the diet has become a festival of various different foods rather than a carnivorous sort of diet where people think, oh, a balanced diet needs to have every single thing. It literally needs to be 10,000 things to balance it out. And then the solution comes in and you say, okay, only one thing can technically sustain you. It's just, it's an odd concept, but it makes so much sense at the same time. So, do you have something to add?
Yes, it's a quite complicated story. I think that those people who are proposing this diet or another diet are not scientists themselves. They just have a good idea, which seem to work at the level of the world, but actually they do not have feedback on that diet, and this is very important, because if you are a physician, I am not a physician, my colleague is a physician, but if you do not have feedback from your patients, you will never be able to tell whether that diet is really good or not, or whether a certain food item is good for you or not. So this is something that keeps you in contact with the reality, and nothing else.
Are there any groups other than you guys around the world that are doing something like this, or are you guys the only ones?
I don't know about other groups using this type of diet, There are some groups who are using a low-carb diet in general, for example, in the treatment of diabetes. You can also find studies with the low-carb diet or ketogenic diet in type 1 diabetes, but this is just a general low-carb diet and not a carnivorous type of low-carb diet.
So why did you guys move away from paleo and keto? And what were some of the issues that you guys noticed, some anecdotes that you might have noticed, or some research that you might have noticed, anything that you might have noticed with these diets which forced you or which were like, okay, we need to go even more carnivorous here? What happened?
It turned out that a ketogenic diet, the popular form of the Paleolithic diet, are only partially effective. And this is something we learn from our patients. And if you have a patient with type 2 diabetes and use the paleo diet, in the form, you can find it in the clinical research or studies, you will see that the blood glucose level gets normalized, or the hypertension normalize, or weight normalize. But you can achieve it with a ketogenic type of diet, the classical ketogenic type of diet. That's okay. But if you have any condition which is beyond type 2 diabetes or the metabolic syndrome, this condition will not react to either the ketogenic diet or the Paleolithic diet. So if you have Crohn's disease, the symptoms of the Crohn's disease will continue. And the same is true for cancer, rheumatoid arthritis, not to mention type 1 diabetes.
Yep. So there's this one interesting concept that you brought up, which is gut permeability. See, I am one of those people who's very ignorant, so please excuse me for that. I like to come off from a very dummy sort of standpoint. So could you explain to me and everybody who's listening what gut or intestinal permeability is?
Yes, this is a central concept which you have to understand autoimmunity itself. So the intestine has a dual function. First, it is used for absorbing nutrients from what we are eating. And second, it is functioning as a barrier. Normally, if you eat, then the nutrients are absorbed in a regulated manner. Okay, so the intestine or the membrane of the intestine are made of cells which are called enterocytes. And the enterocytes are connected to each other by cell junction structures. The most well-known is the tight junction itself. And if there is a leakage, if there is an opening in the tight junction, then the macromolecules of your food will get into your circulation through these microscopic holes within the intestine. And if they get into the circulation, they will elicit an autoimmune response. So this is the mechanism behind the leaky gut and the autoimmunity. And this is a concept which you can find in the literature, in the autoimmunity literature. So this is actually, the concept itself is nothing new. You can find it in the literature for 10, 20 years. So this is not a new concept. The new thing is that it seems that we are able to normalize the intestinal permeability, and as a result normalize autoimmunity. So because this is an important point, because there are many studies researching this phenomenon, and there have been many attempts to normalize the intestinal permeability, to reverse the intestinal permeability, because everyone knows that if we will be able to reverse revert the intestinal permeability, we will be able to normalize autoimmunity. But so far, no other methods, experimental or any dietary method, seem to be effective in doing this.
Okay.
But it seems that, we are measuring intestinal permeability, so we're not just speaking about, and it seems that if we are measuring intestinal permeability in a before-after manner, before diet or during diet, many times it seems that the intestinal permeability normalizes on the diet.
So what factors influence the permeability, and are there any foods that increase, decrease the permeability? How does this mechanism work?
Actually, all food components that can be regarded non-Paleolithic can elicit a pathological increase in intestinal permeability. And actually this is, or potentially everything outside animal-sourced food, so outside meat, fat, offal, eggs, anything. And these are basically plant-based food items or components. And of course, milk, so milk protein is one of the key factors causing intestinal permeability. And of course, there may be additives in the foods we eat that may contribute to the intestinal permeability.
Okay. So does it have any relationship to the carbohydrate, protein intake, or is it just related to the type of food? Is it specific to plant-based versus animal-based?
Yes, it is related to the type of the food.
Okay.
And actually not even with the quantity, because...
Wait, not even quantity?
Maybe not. This may sound surprising, but maybe not.
Okay.
And if you already have an autoimmune disease, this is surely not a matter of the quantity. It is the matter of the quality, which means that even a small quantity of something that is not bad, not good for you, may cause a flare-up in your symptoms. For example, in Crohn's disease. If you are taking a supplement, any kind of vitamin or mineral supplement, which has some kind of additive, either as a filling or covering the pill, this may cause an intestinal permeability increase.
Okay. And what about fiber? How does that impact? Is there any impact on the intestinal permeability, or is it just the food that contains the fiber that influences that as a whole?
I think the latter one. So
okay.
I don't know what's the situation with fiber itself. It may be the matter of the bioactive substances that are contained in the plants. So there are many thousands of them.
Okay. So how does this, I know you guys sent me some material, so I'm curious, and I think it would be nice to share some of it with the listeners, how this intestinal permeability creates this pathway. If you can explain that pathway where it creates autoimmune conditions, that would be fantastic. Okay, so there is a chain of events you are thinking of. Yep.
So if you are eating something which is regarded as non-Paleolithic, then this will open up a window in your intestine. So open up a way to get into the circulation. You get through the intestine, and with the blood or with the lymph, they will be transported. These macromolecules, which are normally not there, which are not normally in the circulation, will be transported to the tissues. And the interesting thing that there are certain macromolecules which show high similarity to certain macromolecules that are found on the surface of certain cells within our body. and they attach to these. So, for example, there is the milk protein, for example, and the milk protein will be transported to the circulation. Normally, this is something that shouldn't occur, but if you have a leaky gut, then the milk protein itself will be transported to the circulation, and it will specifically bind to the myelin sheath of the axons of the neurons, and then they will form a complex, and because of their molecular similarity, and the immune system then attack this complex as a whole. And since if you continue to eat milk or milk protein, this will be a continued exposition of milk protein, and the immune system will continue to attack this complex within your nervous system, and this will bring about autoimmune conditions in the case of the milk protein, and the myelin sheath, the multiple sclerosis, which is a neurological autoimmune disease.
So, question, can everyone have permeable gut, or is that just a natural genetic condition that could occur?
Actually, everybody who is not eating animal meat and fat
okay.
will have this condition.
Ouch.
Or it is very probable.
Okay.
So you do not have to be sick to have an increased intestinal permeability.
Okay.
So this is something which predisposed to an autoimmune condition or cancer.
And so your protocol, or going carnivorous, does that reverse it or stall it?
Yes, definitely. It normalizes the pathological intestinal permeability, and actually there is no other way to normalize it.
Okay. So by normalize, you mean it stalls, it stops it right there, or does it... Oh, wait, that means reverse.
It means reversing.
Okay, that's awesome. So there's one test that you guys mentioned in your work, and that's the PEG 400 test. What's that?
Yes, it is the PEG 400 challenge test. This is a solution of the polyethylene glycol of different molecular sizes. We have 11 molecular sizes of that macromolecule, and this is a solution. And the subjects simply have to drink this solution, and then he will have to collect it across 6 hours from the urine. So this substance will be excreted in the urine. And then we just compare the original amount of the PEG and the amount which is excreted in the urine. And there is an established normal range, which is regarded as being normal for the intestinal permeability. And if there is more PEG excreted, then it is regarded to be elevated. So actually this is a quite old measurement. So you can find studies from the 80s, 90s with this test. But later on, everybody forgot about this old test.
So what are they doing these days?
Actually, we are now setting up experiments with this PEG 400 test to measure the dynamics of intestinal permeability. And actually, this is done in healthy controls who are eating meat and fat.
Okay, well done. So
we have many people surrounding us that are eating in that way, so it is quite common. This is not an unusual thing.
Yeah, and you guys I think this is something big I think is going to happen, this transition phase. So are there any other tests that can reliably measure gut permeability besides the PEG 400, PEG 400?
Yes, PEG 400. Yes, there is a test which is called lactulose mannitol test. It is also used by the conventional medicine, although not very frequently. But the PEG 400 has many advantages over this type of test, because the PEG 400 is something which is non-degradable. It does not degrade in the body. It is an inert molecule, so it does not react with anything in the body. So it is really good to use this test. But the lactulose mannitol test, these are a disaccharide and a monosaccharide which react with more or less substances in the body. So it is not that accurate. And the third one which is used is a zonulin test. But this one is not that specific to the intestinal permeability. It is not that direct as the intestinal permeability test, PEG 400. It gives you a general picture of the membrane permeabilities overall, because we are not only speaking about the intestinal permeability, but there are other membranes in the body which have their own permeability and which can be pathological as well. For example, the blood-brain permeability, which is a second barrier in the body.
Got it. Here's a fun question. Does meat cause cancer?
No.
Okay. So what does cause cancer? What do you guys think is causing all of this madness called cancer?
So if you look at the epidemiological data, you can see
Yeah.
Yeah, epidemiological data are not a direct evidence for anything, but they involve quite many subjects. And to answer some sort of questions, they are quite good, I think. So you can find out that those nations who are eating much milk and dairy, for example, are more prone to certain types of cancer. Or those people as well. For example, the prostate cancer or the breast cancer are specifically linked to milk protein consumption. And this is a correlation or a causality which you can find at other levels of biological approaches. So that's why I was bringing this as an example. But actually, everything can cause you cancer, which is able to induce a pathological permeability of the intestines, because the pathological permeability of the intestines is correlated with the cancerous transformation of the tissues. So the permeability of the intestine comes first, and then the tissue a normal tissue may transform into a cancerous tissue, and this may take some time, but there's a causality between the two.
Wow.
Because and the mechanism which is behind is the contact inhibition, which is a concept you may have heard about it. So
go ahead, please explain that.
Okay, so the individual cells within a certain tissue communicate with each other. They also feel each other, and this is brought about by the cell junction structures, like the one I mentioned before, the tight junctions. And if there is a destruction in these cell junction structures, the cells will not communicate with each other or will not feel each other. And if they do not feel each other, then the contact inhibition will be lost. So one cell feel the other cell and does not allow an endless growth of the tissue. This is the contact inhibition, and this is lost if these substances get into your body. And this may be the milk proteins, this may be many bioactive substances which destroy the cell junction. And of course, if you are eating a carbohydrate-based diet, this is something that will boost the cancerous transformation and will feed the cancer cells, because the cancer cells like to feed with sugar.
Okay, that's interesting. Do a lot of people think this way across the globe? Because this is the first time I'm hearing this.
Which one?
The concept of gut permeability and connection with cancer.
Okay. I think those people who are specifically involved in this issue know this. So if you go directly into the intestinal permeability literature, you can find much data. But they are not, actually they are fashionable, but many people do not know the original sources. Because as I mentioned, the majority of studies are coming from the 90s, 80s, 90s.
Okay.
And then the whole thing was forgotten because nobody could reverse the intestinal permeability.
So, wow, this is awesome. So, are there any diseases that could be caused by meat then like going on an all carnivorous meat-based diet? Like, for example, there's always that ketolytic sort of cancers. You've just blown my mind away, by the way. So I'm just thinking of these possibilities. But anyway, so is there any issues with an all meat diet as far as chronic conditions are concerned?
Not exactly with the diet or with the composition of the diet, but the meat itself can be polluted, for example, or if you are eating prepared foods that are canned, for example, or containing additives or nitrate or nitrate, which are used for making they more durable. This is something which may transform through nitrosamine, which is causing cancer or may cause cancer. And another one is the dioxin, which is an aggressive cancerogen, and it is found in the soil. It can be found actually in everywhere, but in the soil, and later on it is accumulating in the food chain. So it may occur that if you are eating organ meats, for example, they contain much dioxin, and you cannot do anything with that. You can measure it in a laboratory and to find out whether it contains dioxin or not, but otherwise you cannot do anything.
Okay. How would a meat-based person die then? It seems like they won't die. Will they die?
Yes, the Inuit people died as well, but they died because of accidents or because of the mortality in infancy was high, or they just simply starved to death.
Okay, so we could live forever?
I don't think so, unfortunately.
Okay. That would be kind of cool.
I don't know, but if you look up the Keto study, you know that it was written by Staffan Lindeberg, who unfortunately died last year. But he was writing about how do the Ketova people die, and the Ketova people are actually not eating a carnivorous diet. It is a plant-based diet, but it seems that they are extraordinarily healthy and live to a high age. And Stefan wrote in the Ketova book that the Ketova people die because of a fast degenerative disease which occurs during a few days, but no more. And this is not preceded by any long-standing negative condition. They live to a high age and then just die during a few days. And I don't know exactly why or what is the condition, but this is something very fast.
Yeah, because my question would be, okay, let's say the entire world becomes carnivorous. What's going to kill us? Is it going to take like a cholera or some of those bigger diseases that are
I think that is somehow encoded in our genome, so we have to die somehow.
Oh man, I wasn't planning on that. But
I'm not sure about that.
So here's a good question then. What would happen? Have you ever thought what would happen to the world? Just like a fun thought experiment. What would happen if everyone become a carnivore?
Yes, so I often get this question, but you shouldn't be afraid of that. Of course, the planet is too small to provide animal-sourced food to everybody. But I'm not afraid of too many people eating animal-sourced food. So actually, most of the people doesn't want to hear about eating in a healthy way, whatever a healthy diet is. But second, most of the people do not want to eat animal meat fat based. They always want to eat something else. But actually much more people could eat animals than they are eating today. So if you go back time, at least in Hungary, 50 years ago, every family that were living in the countryside had one pig or two. And now they do not more have any pigs in their courtyard. But they still have the place for the pig, but the pigs have disappeared.
Yeah. Are you guys facing the same issues that we are over here in the United States with the rising diabetes and that kind of stuff? All these conditions?
Yes, it is rising all over the world.
Well, not cool. How do you guys prepare your food, as in your meat specifically? Is there some precautions you take that is different from what we do? Like normally what I do is I just put it on top of a grill and I just make it. I don't know if that's the best method, if you want to correct me, because I just ordered a grill. Hopefully I did not shoot myself in the foot with that.
That's okay. I also like grilled food. The important thing to remember is to always eat enough fat with the meat, because the fat-protein ratio is important. So it is much more important than whether eating grilled food or not grilled food. So this is one thing. And the second thing is to eat organ meat on a regular basis. So not just grilled meat, because the vitamins and minerals are coming from the organ meat, from the liver and from the brain. So, but otherwise it makes no difference whether you cook or braise or anything. Okay.
And so what I've noticed is that you guys add to a carnivorous diet rather than the traditional method of the ketogenic diet, where you have this garden variety approach where you can, as long as you're under 30 carbs, you're fine. So I've noticed that instead you guys start with a very carnivorous framework and then add things accordingly. How do you guys decide what to add?
it is already defined what to add. So we may only add those food items that can be regarded Paleolithic. So as you may know, there are 6 food groups which are excluded from the Paleolithic diet. And these food items should never be reintroduced into your diet. So you may add some carrots or kale or very little amount of fruits or honey, because there are no problem with these items if you keep them limited. But you should never introduce vegetable oils, for example, or oil seeds, if you are treating a patient with an autoimmune disease or cancer. So this is something really against getting cured.
Okay. Sounds good. So this question I ask a lot of different people is, what kind of biomarkers do you think that a lot of people are chasing are just useless? And what kind of biomarkers should people be chasing instead?
It depends on what is your question, so I don't think that there is a general biomarker for everything.
That's true.
We are using a quite long list of laboratory parameters, and actually the pattern of the measured level of these laboratory parameters is important. So what we found important are the inflammation markers, like fibrinogen, erythrocyte sedimentation rate, and CRP. So and I think these are the most predictive, and they can be very useful in the follow-up of the disease, or whether the patient is adhering to the diet or not. But there are other ones as well. So I would, instead of a single biomarker, I would say a combination of a few important laboratory parameters is important.
Okay. So let's go back to cancer. Sorry, I have to go back to cancer. So what happens when you put meat against cancer? I'm going to unleash you.
So the important thing is what you have to see. You can hear all over that the ketogenic diet is able to cure cancer, and the studies that had been carried out in animal models or in test tubes are really promising. But actually, if you look at the clinical data, the results are not that promising. So I do not know whether you are familiar with this issue or not.
I'm not too familiar with a lot of things, but now everybody's about to get familiar.
Okay, so what I'm speaking about is the classical ketogenic diet, which is quite different from the ketogenic diet what we are using, or a carnivorous or a paleo keto diet. Because the classical ketogenic diet is a diet which is able to produce or generate and maintain ketosis. But this is only one side of the story. The classical ketogenic diet is actually a plant-based diet. So it is coming from the world of eating plants, and that's why the fat component in the classical ketogenic diet is derived from vegetable oils. And these vegetable oils include coconut oil, include heavy cream, include olive oil, margarines. So actually these are all plant oils. And some of them are regarded as being healthy. Or you can hear that the coconut oil is boost the immune system, and you can hear everything. Mm-hmm. But you cannot hear that the coconut oil is bad for you.
Hey,
but actually,
the American Heart Association that we have, they don't like they don't like coconut oil either.
yes. Okay, a single time they can be right.
Please continue.
Yeah, this is only by chance. But actually, we clearly see that if a patient is eating vegetable oils, it will increase the intestinal permeability. And we come across many patients who started the classical ketogenic diet. For example, in epilepsy patients, most of them are coming with epilepsy, and they still experiencing seizures. And when they switch to a carnivorous type of ketogenic diet, that is animal fat-based diet, then they got better or even become seizure-free. And the same is true for cancer. There are so many internet-based resources for patients, and many of them are based on coconut oil and so on, and start with the diet. But something is not good. The laboratory parameters show that the inflammation of the body is high, and the parameters are not normal, and the disease is progressing. But when they switch to the Paleo Keto diet, then all the laboratory parameters return in the normal range, and the disease remains stable or reverses. So unfortunately, there is a big misunderstanding around the ketogenic diet, and that's really bad. And if you go back time, just to mention an interesting point, if we go back 100 years, when the ketogenic diet was invented in the US and was used for epilepsy children. You may be familiar with this because this is a very famous story. So the ketogenic diet was used as an exclusive therapy in the US in the 20s and in the 30s, and it is widely used. It was effective, and so on. And later on came the anti-epileptics, and the ketogenic diet waned. And then in the 90s, the ketogenic diet was found again, and was received popularity. But the important thing is that the original ketogenic diet, the one that was used in the 20s and 30s, it was much closer to the Paleo Keto diet, because it was still before the nutrition science went in a wrong way. It was a diet that was based on meat, on animal fat, lard, butter. Butter may not be that good, but it is still much better than coconut oil, for example. So if you look at the recipes from 100 years ago that was used for treating epilepsy patients, that was more similar to our recipes with the Paleo Keto diet. And the most important thing is that the ketogenic diet at that time was much more successful in treating epilepsy children, because now the epilepsy children, only 10% of the epilepsy children become seizure-free with a classical ketogenic diet, and the 90% goes on with seizures. So 10% seizure freedom is not much. But at that time, 50% of the children became seizure-free, and that's a large difference. So yeah. I think we should shift the classical ketogenic diet being a carnivorous, animal fat-based diet.
Well, the thing is, there's no incentive for any food company to put money into this sort of research, hands down. And I think we both realize that we've become so entrenched in these different food companies and food industries and pharmaceutical companies that it's very difficult for people to say, oh, we messed up the last 500, 1,000 years of food and nutrition. Oh, we just, maybe agriculture was not the best thing we did to humanity. So it will be interesting how in the next 10, 20, 50 years, how things are going to pan out, because we're starting to notice that in our community as well, as people are going to a mostly carnivorous-based diet. There's plenty of anecdotes, but the question is, and I bring this question to you, how will we build the science around it? Or is it just going to be anecdotes?
Mm-hmm. I think it will take some time to build science around it. Because this is going against the whole system. It is going, what we are doing, it is going against the healthcare system as a whole, and it is going against the whole structure of the current agriculture and the pharmaceutical industry, and actually almost everything around you. So everything is too much plant oriented, or you can hear that certain medicines are derived from plants, but you have never heard that medicine from an animal.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Very good point. So everyone has to change his or her own life, and shouldn't be weighted from the whole system. Well, one of the biggest things we're noticing here is the cultural shift towards vegetarianism and veganism. I don't know how prominent it is over at your place, but that's quite a bit of a concern, or orange flag or red flag, whatever you want to call it. Because of the whole less cruelty to animals and sustainability and all those things. We've already dealt with those in our previous podcast, by the way. So, but are you seeing that sort of shift over there too? Like this?
Yes, unfortunately. So everything what you have in the US is also existing in Europe and in Hungary. So those things spread quite quickly. And I think the ideology behind the vegetarianism is becoming popular, you know, and that's why patients also change their diet.
Yeah.
Into something which is in accordance with Far East ideology or religion. Mm-hmm.
So
actually, we should look at our own traditions where we are living. You know, Hungarians are meat eaters, but if you look at any traditional culture or diet, they are all meat eaters.
Yeah. So, what is the connection? This I found interesting. I think you published a paper on this. Vitamin D and epilepsy. What's going on over there?
It is a bilateral relationship between epilepsy and vitamin C, at least, because if you have low level of vitamin D, this will predispose to epileptic seizures. You know, and if you experience, or not you, but an epilepsy patient experience an epileptic seizure, then this will decrease the level of vitamin D in the blood, and this will predispose to the next epileptic seizure. So that's a vicious circle. And the other thing is that the epilepsy is being treated by medicines, anti-epileptics, and the anti-epileptics decrease the circulating level of vitamin D. So that's why if an epilepsy patient starts taking anti-epileptics, he or she will never stop experiencing seizures. It's just conserving a situation. Okay. So that's a really bad thing. And actually, if you look at one of the latest guidelines for vitamin D by the Endocrine Society of the US, epilepsy is one of the conditions where vitamin D is recommended, also by the guideline.
Okay. So what about vitamin C and evolution? I think there's a little bit of a snippet that you brought up there. Do you want to explain a little bit on that?
Yes, I think that the only way to obtain vitamin C, which is optimal, should be the same as the one being evolutionarily conserved. So we frequently hear that we cannot make our own vitamin C because we have lost the enzyme, which is actually the last step in the conversion of vitamin C from the glucose. And that's why we cannot produce vitamin C. But actually there are many other animals in the animal kingdom which also lose this gene or have a mutation in this gene, but they are not considered as being defective animal. So what I think is humans are not defective as well. So if and you can find many examples from hunter-gatherer societies or meat-eater societies that never eat plants and vegetables and still do not exhibit scurvy or symptoms or scurvy. For example, the Inuit people eat the liver, the organ meat of the animals as well. And so far as the 60s or the 70s, there were no single instances of scurvy, for example, in Greenland or Canada. But after they shift toward a westernized diet, the occurrence of scurvy increased. And in these days they are quite sick. So because they underwent a transition which was very fast. So they underwent something which we underwent during the past 1,000 years, and this was too fast. And now you may have heard that the suicide rate is something dramatic, and increase in tuberculosis and diabetes is on the rise as well.
Sounds good. So over here, we've started noticing this trend of artificially raising ketone levels. So are there any benefits to it, or is this just a wild goose chase? Or as in, it's not really that, it's kind of pointless?
I do think that it is pointless, because this sounds may sound good at the level of the words again, but producing ketones is just one thing at the end of a long chain of biochemical and physiological events. So there are many other advantages of eating animal meat and fat. Just think about the fat-soluble nutrients, and many other benefits are associated with that, or increasing or normalizing the intestinal permeability, for example. But if you aim at increasing the ketone levels through a supplement, it may include some problems. So if you are eating a supplement, it will contain not just the ketones, but the filling or the cover of the pill as well. And these additives are among those substances which increase the intestinal permeability. So it is most simple and straightforward to follow the way it is natural and evolutionary adapted, and you can never be smarter than evolution itself.
Yeah, and I think there's, and this is going to broaden up the topic a little bit, but we notice that our brains in this, even in society as a whole, we cannot handle this much information. We cannot handle this social inputs. I mean, just look at your internet. There's way too much information and we cannot process it all. So it's kind of tough to, so what would your strategy be? Let's see what you have to say. Let's say, where would you go, or who would you follow? How would you deduce this educator or this scientist or this researcher, whoever it is legit, or as in you can trust them? How would you litmus test these people?
So you have to follow the strategy or the method which is working in reality. So that's so simple. And it is, of course, it is not that simple for a layman, for example, but it is more easy for me because I am specialized in this topic, you know. So I have contact with patients. I see the follow-up, and these are not just single patients. Overall, we had thousands of patients, and if they adhere 100% of the diet to the diet, always the same things will happen. So it is very predictable. It is very consistent. So if an ex-patient is coming to us, he will either believe it or not. You know, it is his decision. And it is not easy for a lay person.
Got it. So what are some of the critiques that people have for your protocol or methodology, and how would you respond to them?
Actually, we are getting critics quite often, but these are seldomly real arguments, you know. So most of them are coming from common medical misconceptions, like if you eat too much animal protein, then you will develop kidney failure. Or another type of criticism is to transfer the side effects of the classical ketogenic diet to the Paleolithic Ketogenic Diet, and say it is associated with the ketosis itself. But actually, these side effects does not result from the ketosis itself, but from the unhealthy composition of the classical ketogenic diet. And this is a difference, and this is very difficult to explain, because those people who formulating this criticism do neither know the classical ketogenic diet or any diet that is used in the treatment of diseases. So it is really difficult to get into a real scientific debate, because it is quite one-sided, you know.
Okay. So what about, here's a good question. What about gut bacteria? I mean, we've asked every practical carnivore who has shown up to this podcast this question about gut bacteria. Is there any importance to it, or is it, or just a meat-only diet will fix it, or a carnivorous diet in general will just, you don't have to bother about it?
Yes, you do not have to think too much about the microbiome or the gut bacteria, because if you are eating meat fat based, it will normalize. It will be the way as it should be.
Yeah, we had.
We are not grazers, you know. So plant eaters are those animals that really need gut bacteria, but not carnivores.
Yeah, we had one of our friends, and who's probably listening to this podcast at one point, who went on a carnivorous diet, like an all-meat diet, and he started taking fiber supplements, and we just said, you don't need to, really? So that was kind of interesting. So have we covered all the bases as far as the general things that you guys talk about, or is there something else, a topic that we might have missed before we get into community questions?
There are many, but we can go on with the community questions.
No, but I'm going to give this stage to you, to be honest, because if you have anything that a lot of the U.S. doctors or physicians or any of us are missing out on, I want you to let them know.
So I think it is a good idea to take an evolutionary a viewpoint, and because if you accept that humans are meat eaters by their very nature, then many of the contradictions or apparent contradictions will resolve. So you will continue to have questions like how will I get my vitamin C on an animal meat fat based diet? Or what about a kidney failure, or increasing uric acid, and all these questions have an answer if you accept that we are meat eaters, and you can accept this by accepting evolution and the evolutionary concept of health and disease.
Okay. All right. So question here would be, this is very common over here in the United States, the grass-based versus grain-based. What's your take on that as far as meat is concerned?
Obviously, a grass-based, grass-fed animal is much more nutritious, of course. This is...
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So what about coffee and alcohol?
Yes. Difficult questions.
Here's my question to you, the person who's leading this. Do you drink coffee and alcohol?
Yes, I will answer this as well. So actually, coffee and alcohol are not meat and fat. So they are not within a carnivorous diet by nature. Alcohol is by no means allowed, because alcohol itself is increasing intestinal permeability. The second point is that most alcoholic drinks are derived from cereals. For example, beer is produced from barley, and so on. Or another alcoholic drink is vodka is produced from wheat, as far as I know. And wheat as a whole group is not good for you. You know, there is actually only one type of alcoholic drink which we allow, of course in moderation and not in a regular basis. And actually this is a Hungarian alcoholic drink, and this is called Pálinka. And this is produced from fruit, and this is a clear alcohol together with the flavors of the fruit, and it contains nothing else, just these. So the other components from the fruit are not, or the plants are not in that drink. So this is something can be used as a last resort if you want to drink alcohol.
So the only alcohol that is allowed is Hungarian. I see what you're doing. No Bud Light, no Coors Light, none of the American beers. But
actually, this was accepted by the government as a Hungaricum. You know? So this is defended by the law, and And many other countries have produced something like that, but originally, as far as I know, it is Hungarian. But you can produce it anywhere in the world. But there are many families in Hungary who are involved in producing palinka, so that's why it is something very traditional. Actually, almost every family in Hungarian is producing his or her own palinka.
Okay.
But still in moderation. Yes, and the coffee and tea. So the bad thing about coffee and tea is that they are containing hundreds or thousands of bioactive compounds, including polyphenols and different types of antioxidants, which are biologically active. So we do not recommend drinking green tea or black tea because they are much worse than coffee. I cannot give you a quite sound explanation. This is something we know by observation. So coffee is either not very good, but if you are relatively healthy, or if you have already been doing the Paleo Ketogenic Diet for at least 2 or 3 months, and normalize your condition more or less, then you can introduce coffee in your diet. So myself, I'm drinking coffee, but I am in the process of quitting it. So I am drinking coffee from cups that are always smaller and smaller, but I still drink coffee. But
yeah,
I feel that it is not good for me. I clearly feel.
Yeah. I think this is where an interesting question could be asked is, where would you stop or where would you end? As in, because a lot of people say, would look at this diet and say that I'm missing out on a lot of the things that so this is me playing the devil's advocate here. They'd say this is too restrictive. It's too, I'm only eating meat and drinking water or barely eating anything at all. It's not fun. It's not pleasurable. What would be your response to those people? Or is that, what would you say to them?
Mm-hmm. So you have to weigh up the negative and the positive sides, So, for example, in my case, I like drinking coffee, but actually I don't feel well. So I feel a pain in my back, for example. I feel nausea. I don't feel well after half an hour. But so far I'm drinking the coffee, I'm feeling well. So I have to think a little bit forward. and the same thing applies for eating cake or dairy. And this is something which occurs with a longer time frame, but you have to know that the consequences. And if you are looking at the people around you, or from the people of the age of our parents, you cannot see a single anyone who is completely healthy. And if we do not change our diet in this way, we will end up like they ended up.
So here's the interesting question, which I think I sent you an email about as well, which is keto and paleo just a transition period from a plant-based diet to carnivorous diet in human history, like right now?
That's a good question. I do not see the future. I cannot tell you, but maybe yes, because evolution is still working and we are the subject of evolution. Yeah. So I think something should happen within some time.
And so if I were to give you $1 billion, what kind of research would you like to see?
Thank you for giving $1 billion. I think I would go on with our research with the intestinal permeability testing, because I think this is to provide quite interesting data, which we do not have, and this is something in addition to which is an experience, because it is something concrete, measured, replicable. So I will go on with that.
Okay. And how would you design an ideal diet for a human being?
I do not have to design a diet for humans, because evolution have already designed the diet. So there is no need for a new diet, just what we already have. Wow.
Okay. No, that's awesome. It's like I don't need to do it. It's already done. So, what's next for you guys in Hungary? What are you guys working on at Paleo Medicina? Anything you want to share?
Actually, we do not want to change the world, because it is not possible. We do not want to change the healthcare system, because it is not realistic at this point of our lives. What we are doing now is to build something in parallel to the official healthcare system. So we are counseling patients. We are running a small rehabilitation center where patients can come across the diet. We are running patient clubs, so organizing get-togethers for patients who are eating in this way, not to feel that alone with their diet. And we are doing the research with the intestinal permeability. We are publishing our data. So actually we are doing almost everything what the official system is doing as well, or not doing. But we would like to this run as a whole system, and not just single consultations, but something more comprehensive. And that's what we are working on.
You know, what I would like to see is your message to move towards the younger generation and across social media and all those places, because there are certain groups on Facebook, such as Principia Carnivora, Zeroing on Health, and they have thousands of members there that really actually respect you guys and really know about you guys too. I don't know if you guys know that yet. They know about you. But yeah, I think the message needs to somehow get across to some of the people that are going to be coming up next, because they're going to be the future of the world. So what would be your message then to the folks? Like, is there a message that you have, like a final message?
So those people in the carnivores group just continue. So I think they are on the right avenue, and but the other people are more important to send a message to, and the message would be that they should remember that there is a solution, and so far they are young and healthy. Nobody is thinking about changing a diet, but it is important to plan ahead, and in case they encounter or experience a disease, they should remember and know that there are other ways than offered by the official healthcare system, which will not cure them.
Yeah, you guys are doing something really awesome, really great, and just challenging the whole dynamic. I can't thank you guys enough for that. How can people reach out to you?
They can reach us at our homepage, paleomedicina.com, and we are also on Twitter and the Facebook. So on Facebook, Paleo Medicina is the address as well.
Yeah. Do you guys offer some sort of counseling or help to people, let's say, from the United States or abroad, or are you just local?
Yes, we are providing online consultations as well. So subscribe.
Okay, sounds fantastic. There's going to be a few people, hopefully, that'll come your way right after this podcast. So thank you so much for being on the show. If you guys want anything from us, we are more than happy to help you guys in whatever ways possible. I think it's kind of quite a bit of an honor for you to be on our podcast. Thank you.
Thank you. It was an honor to speak to you and a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the show. Normally, this is the part where I plug in Keto Geek, the products, and where to go to sign up for our newsletter. However, I am going to leave you guys with a question. And this question has been itching in my brain for quite some time, especially after talking to several of the experts that have been on the show and many people that are close to me. But I think it's about time I pass this question to everyone who is listening as well. And the question is, did we just commit the biggest self-genocide in human history while pursuing a plant-based diet and then building industries around it to entrench it, all the while creating a belief system of anthropomorphic suffering upon living creatures? I wonder if this would be factored into sustainability. And now I'm just going to let this sink in.